Live on LinkedIn. I am here. Happy New Year 2026 here with the Construction Mentor, which is what he is known as on all social media platforms. But your name is Ryan Eisenhauer. Did I get that right? You also go by Ike.
That's right. Yeah, and I go by Ike. If anybody's any kind of familiar with American history, Eisenhower, Ike, it's pretty easy to figure out.
Pretty easy to figure out. Well, I am streaming live from the Emser Tile and Stone showroom in Coral Springs, which is also tied to our distribution center. So yeah, how are you doing today? I know you are in the beautiful state of Texas and the weather is awesome. Also over there, we were just talking about that in the pre-show.
Yeah, listen, I've lived in a bunch of different places in the country and most recently Texas for the last 6 months. And I can tell you that the weather here is about as perfect as it gets compared to everywhere else. I mean, I grew up in Boston. I heard it was 8 degrees there yesterday. So I'm all set with that. I'm definitely happy where I'm at.
Oh yeah, I will skip the 8-degree days all day, every day. I'm actually wearing a sweater today because it was pretty cold this morning in Florida. It was about 40s. We got a cold front over here. And now I think it's 75 outside. It's way too hot to be wearing a sweater. but that's the beauty of winters in the South. So anyway, we're not on here to talk about the weather. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gloria Marie, and I am your host. I'm a general contractor by trade, but now the business development lead for Emser Tile and Stone in the luxury and outdoor division for the East Coast. I'm here today with the construction mentor, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and why he goes by that name, and then we'll jump right in.
So I've been in the industry about 21 years, and if you're watching this and paying attention to the video feed, you might think that I look too young to be in the industry for about 21 years. I was very, very fortunate at a very young age to get experience in the industry that most people don't get until they're 23, 24, 25 years old. I started out, boots and jeans, digging holes, ripping roofs, scrubbing toilets on job sites, did all the grunt work. And from there, I ended up getting some opportunities to draft sheet metal in high school. I was working at a sheet metal shop, running around basically as a gopher, right? What does that mean? Go for this, go for that, in a van, driving around to supply houses and things for that same shop for the tin knockers and the pipe fitters. And then I went to college and I got a degree and I started doing HVAC, plumbing, and fire protection design until I realized that I didn't want to be an engineer for a lot of reasons, particularly because of my personality and engineers' personalities versus contractors' personalities. So I jumped over to the general contracting side about 13 years ago and been over there ever since. I think this is where I'm going to stay for the remainder of my career, but basically started, like I said, at that minimum wage under the table, $8 an hour, digging holes, to now I'm a director. And I went up every rung of the ladder all the way up. And now I'm a director for a national group at one of the top 10 E&R general contractors in the country. So along that road, getting to the point of why I call myself the construction mentor, why I dubbed myself that, is because, I was very fortunate. Like I said, I got a very early entrance into the industry. I had the direct mentorship. I had the direct insight. I had people giving me the answers to the test, right? And I didn't have it easy growing up, and a lot of people don't. But a lot of people don't have that kind of mentorship. They don't have that advantage. So this platform that I've built with the alias, the construction mentor, is to do that. It's to give people the mentorship that they need. Number one, to break into the industry. Number two, to climb that ladder and to basically build whatever kind of life, they dream of.
So that's a great segue into the question that I ask everybody on my show. And we kick off the show and then just kind of see where it rolls on from there. We are on LinkedIn, so we know the attention span is not that great. And it is the end of the day. So we're going to stay on here for about 45 minutes or so and open it up if there are any live questions, to any live questions. But why construction?
It's really all I knew. It was kind of the only option that I had. Everybody in my family, I grew up outside of Boston, and my dad was a union pipe fitter, and I had uncles that were union elevator guys, and it's just even outside of my family, all my friends' dads were in the trades. I just grew
Mhm.
up in a very middle class, blue collar area, and there was no other industry that I wanted to be in. I'm a huge sports fan. And when I was 10, 11 years old, my dad was the super for Gillette Stadium where the Patriots play. And I got to go to that every weekend for the whole 2.5 years that was being built. So, you know, in my mind at 10 and 11 years old, every job site like that was that cool. Right. But
Of course.
it was already, in my mind that this is what I wanted to do. So, like I said, it was the biggest thing there is that I also knew what kind of money could be made. Right. And I saw the different jobs that were available, and I understood that there was all kinds of career paths outside of just, turning wrenches and doing the manual labor.
Yeah, you actually started your career. You glossed over it a little bit earlier, doing a little bit of the grunt work, right? Digging holes, demolishing walls, cleaning job sites, being a go for this and a go for that. And to be fair, I kind of started a little bit similar. This is the second career for me, but I just started as a translator on a job. I really started in an office doing procurement and as an assistant project manager, and then got moved to a site to translate. Then they fired the site super. They had me go in as an interim site super. And, I just kind of moved up pretty quickly, just having the ability to communicate and such. But, of those early years that you had, because you have a very different experience, what did those teach you in terms of leadership and skills that you use today as an executive for all those younger guys who are and gals sweeping the floor or just on site translating, and they're like, what are these people talking about?
Well, there's a few things with that. I definitely learned how not to lead. Right. Like if you're paying attention, I think one
Yes.
of the I think one of the bad
Yes.
parts of the industry is some of the stigmas that we have, because people get in, and whether it's they try to mirror or they adopt all the leadership styles that they were under just because that's what
Hmm.
they know and that's what they think is the right thing to do, or because the industry scars them, they end up picking some really bad habits up for leadership, right? And how you treat each other, how you communicate, diplomacy, just all the above, right? But I think the most important thing that I've been able to spin to my advantage is that, my father was in the union. He was a subcontractor. I heard all the complaints and all the war stories of him coordinating with general contractors and project managers and supers, right? So I was abundantly aware of what I thought. I would obviously assume that my dad is like a respected guy, right? All
Hmm.
respected guys and competent guys like my dad in the field thought of those people. So I knew what the pain points were. Like I heard that, this guy conducted himself this way. This young kid comes on a job site and he talks down to me and he thinks he can tell me how to do my job. And I've been doing this longer than he's been alive. So I think that's a huge mistake that a lot of people make, especially coming out of college, when they step into these assistant project manager or assistant super roles, or even coming out of the trade halls and trying to, become a foreman on site, whatever it
Hmm.
is, they come out with just the wrong mentality, just the totally wrong mentality. So just understanding that perspective, and when you're on site, you're going to be coordinating with people that have been in the industry for a very long time, right? Because they're going to be the leaders. So understanding their pain points, the way that they don't like to be talked to, and how you can actually talk to them in a productive way while still getting what you want. It's a dance. It's definitely an art form, but it was kind of second nature to me just because I grew up around it and I was just aware.
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think an advantage that you had that a lot of folks don't have, which is why your platform is, in my opinion, so great. You have all these followers on the platforms where the Gen Z and even folks that are transitioning careers are, looking and seeking mentorship, and seeking to find out how they need to navigate this industry, because we do have a bad rap, right? We're the industry that people go into if they're too dumb to go to college. And you and I talked a lot about that on your podcast last year. So, folks, there's links all over the internet, but I'm sure my team will link it below. If you didn't hear my interview on the construction mentor, probably one of my best interviews yet. And the last interview I did actually before transitioning from being a business owner and exiting out of Glowjoy full time and moving over to the Emser Tile and Stone family, where I am now. So, I see a lot of the interaction, and I had people even shoot me a DM. I asked them, "Hey, how did you find me?" And they say, "Hey, I heard you on the Construction Mentors podcast, and I think you're really cool," or, "You're
Thank
very
you.
interesting," or whatever. So shout out
Thank
to all the followers that follow me from the Construction Mentors podcast, because, that was I think exactly a year ago now. And, folks are still listening to that. So kudos to you. How did you end up picking the platforms that you were going to focus on for your audience?
Oh man, I will
Because
tell
there's
you
so
that
many of them.
when I look at the platforms too, this is like when I start to feel old. And like, I just mentioned that like when I came into the business, I knew I was a young person and I knew how to conduct myself. And now all of a sudden I have all these young people coming in and they look to me as like an older person. And suddenly I have like
Mhm.
gray hair and stuff like that. Somewhere along the line, I got old. Right.
Mhm.
And I think Instagram was just natural to me because that's what millennials gravitate towards, right? Like that's the
Yep.
social media that we do. I'm also on TikTok, but I struggle on TikTok because like it just doesn't make sense to me, right?
Yeah, I didn't even bother with TikTok, to be honest. I was like, I'm too old for that.
And it's what, and but I have to focus on it because that's where the demographic is that I'm trying to reach, right? So,
Right.
so I'm getting better at it, and so that the Instagram was obvious to me because I was on it, and then TikTok was something that I thought that I needed, and then YouTube because I was trying to find a way to host a podcast, and I was like, well, I don't really
Mhm.
know. I could figure out how to like upload a video to YouTube, so that worked.
Right.
And then I realized that what's the best way for me to listen and to take in content because you always have to think about like the consumer, right? Like, how do I like to listen? And I'm like, oh, I like listening on Spotify in my car when I'm driving.
Mhm.
That's the best time for me. So then, I had to figure it out, try all kinds of things, and find out how to try and post one time and have it go across all the platforms. And just like anything in life, you just kind of throw yourself out there and figure it out.
Yeah, and if you can't figure it out, you can hire people, and that's what I did, right?
And
I
I think one of the cooler things too is that like as I started posting and then one clip will go viral and you get a following, I ended up talking to a ton of influencers in the construction industry and even outside. Like there's a guy with a platform B-ball 101 or B-ball 01, and he's a basketball coach. He's got like 200,000
Nice.
followers, and he just reached out to me and was like, "Hey, you should be doing this with your content. I love it, but like let me give you some pointers." We hop on a call and that's not the only example. I could name a dozen influencers who just reached out just for altruistically just to help out. So I'm very lucky to have the people that reached out and helped me.
Yeah, same here. I've had some influencers. I don't have a huge following on Instagram. I've always been pretty popular here on LinkedIn, and the construction industry generally is just not on LinkedIn. So it's really not that complicated to have your content actually
Right.
shine on LinkedIn if you're drilling down into a niche. And they're constantly changing their algorithms, and all
All the
the
time.
platforms are constantly changing their algorithms. It gets very frustrating, but I think the consistency, which is what one of the influencers that reached out to me, they were like, "Hey, you need to do this. Your content is
Mhm.
so great. Like you need to do this more than once a month or once every six
Right.
weeks. It should really be every other week or every week even. And you should be posting clips of these things," which is what I started to do a little bit more recently. And it drives a little bit more audience and a little bit more attention to the channels. And at the end of the day, I'm not doing these things for vanity metrics. It's really
Mhm.
for those messages from the young woman who shot me a DM and said she listened to your podcast. I inspired her, and she turned around and followed me on Instagram and whatever other platforms. So we do it to inspire and really to kind of, at least for me, to show others that there's so many different paths to construction. So with that,
Well, it's a good point if you don't mind before you move on to the
yeah,
next thing. what I just described is the same thing that applies to anything in life, and especially the construction industry. One of the big complaints that I get and that I just see, for a
Mhm.
stigma that the construction industry has is like, you got to know somebody, or somebody doesn't want to teach me, or you got to show up. Like, put yourself out there, put
Yes.
yourself in a situation, just get on the field, right? And they will find you. The more you show up consistently and just put the work in and just really try to get better all the time, the right mentors, your light is going to shine. And when your light is shining, other people can see you and other people are going to come into your life. If you don't show up, then nobody's going to find you to be able to help you. So, like, I didn't know every single mentor that I had, whether it's on Instagram or in construction, when I was born. The most valuable
Mhm.
mentors that I had were I got a new job, showed up, worked, they saw me, they were a valuable person in my life. Went to the next job, moved up, moved out, move over, whatever it was, met another person. But it's just because I kept showing up consistently no matter where it was and what I was trying to do.
Absolutely, and that's a great point actually, because particularly in the unions and some of the larger conglomerates, folks always think you need to know somebody in order to excel or in order to succeed. But you and I are big proponents of, you show up, you want to do the job, you do the job, you show your skills, you communicate properly, and you could really do anything in the construction industry. You've openly shared that despite earning both a bachelor's degree yourself and an MBA, no client or employer has ever even asked about them. Why don't you talk a little bit
Zero
about
times.
that? Yeah, why don't you talk a little bit about that? Because I post on my LinkedIn that I went to Baylor, and folks
Hmm.
assume I went to. I mean, I put it there. I put the years. I never
Hmm.
graduated. It doesn't say bachelor's degree in whatever. It just says attended Baylor University. But folks automatically assume that your girl graduated because I can communicate and have the job that I have. But nobody's ever asked.
Yeah, I mean, listen, nobody has ever asked, how old I was or where I had worked, or especially in this day and age, you don't even see people half the time because they're just a name and an email, or
Hmm.
a blank face on a Teams call. But nobody has ever asked, once where I went to school, or how I started, or really even like what my background was. But I think about when I did graduate, or why I even went to college in the first place. That's a good place to
Hmm.
start.
Yeah.
I went because I was signed up for the union, right? I knew people in the union. I remember interviewing when I was in high school to get into the union right after I graduated. I would have been in at 17 years old. And I sat down for the interview, and the guy looked at my name, like Eisenhower's, how many Eisenhowers are there? Especially in local 537 in Boston, right? Like, so
Right.
my dad was in for, 30 years at the time. And he was just like, oh, you know the answers to every question I'm going to ask. Like, this is pointless. And we just started talking about sports, right? But my dad always said that he wanted me to go to college. I was smart enough. I was the type of kid that I could just kind of sleep through class and get A's. So
Hmm.
I also, I'll be honest, I wanted to party, right? So I wanted to go to college. That was really appealing to me. So I'm like, well, I could go in the union after that. Like, I'll just go to college first. And I'm like, so what do I even do? Like, how do I pick a major? I got to get into construction. Engineering sounds good because I like math. And that just sounds really impressive. And my dad's truck says mechanical contractor on it, so mechanical engineer must be the one, right? Right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, must
honestly,
be. I mean, those PE letters look really good at the end of your name, right? If people
and I
know
didn't
what
even
they
know what that
are.
was, right? Like, all I
If people
knew
know what they are.
was like, okay, so you have mechanical engineers. They design ductwork and pipe. Okay, I'll go to school for that. So I
Mhm.
went to Wentworth Institute of Technology in Boston. And if you're in the construction area anywhere in Boston or New England, like 50% chance you went to Wentworth. That's like the college to go to for anything construction related, that or Northeastern. And then I came out, and I was able, well, while I was in college, I was able to work as an engineer, and I did a ton of work. I was designing buildings, basically HVAC, plumbing, and fire protection for multi-$100 million jobs. Like the big building, if anyone knows Logan Airport, and when you drive into Logan Airport and there's the big rental car facility, all the
Mhm.
MEPs in that building, well, not E, but the mechanical, the plumbing, and the fire protection, designed by
Mhm.
yours truly when I was 19 years old. Terrible design.
Okay.
I have it right here. I look at it every once in a while and I'm like, wow, that was terrible. But they let me do it. Nobody was asking how old the guy was that made this drawing, right?
Right.
Like, nobody had a clue. The airport didn't know. Mass Port Authority didn't know. Suffolk Construction, who was building the
They
job,
do now.
they had no clue. They might now if they're listening to this, right? And maybe they do if they realize how bad the drawings were when they were looking at them. But
how many RFIs did you have, though? No, I'm just kidding.
I didn't even understand how quickly RFIs had to be responded to, And so, long story short, nobody asked when I was getting that experience, and look at how the high profile job that I was on, right?
Right.
Nobody asked when I left there and I moved across the country to go work on a design build mechanical contractor, ACCO, ACCO. They're probably good for $1 billion a year now as a mechanical sub in California. I sat down in the interview and he's like, "What is Wentworth?" And I was like, "It's a school." He's like, "It's not like ITT Tech, right?" And I was like, "No, it's not ITT Tech." And he goes, "Okay." And that was it. That was the only question. He was like, "Oh, so you've worked on jobs like this? You're hired." Boom, $62,500, and that was 15 years ago that I got hired in that job. And since then, it's just always been about the last thing you did. What's the last few projects that you did? And sometimes, can I talk to the architect or can I talk to the client that you worked with as a reference? That's it. Nobody has ever asked. Especially when I went to the general contracting side, they were like, "Do you want to be a general contractor? Like you have great experience." And I went over to the GC side at 23 years old, and they just hired me as a full-on superintendent right away. They don't even hire college graduates at that age. It was purely based on my experience that I had. So from that point, and I've been with the same company almost the entire time, it's just all been about putting me in front of clients. And when my name gets presented, they're like, "What was the last project that he was on?" They just want to make sure that I'm qualified. They don't ask where I went to college. In fact, I interviewed one time for a project, and the guy that I was with, my estimator on my team, went to Harvard. There was nobody asked or cared if he went to Harvard. I went to a school that was like a fifth of the cost of Harvard, and there was no delineation between the two of us. They just cared that we had the experience to run the job. We made the same amount of money. That was 10 years ago. So,
and I bring that up because college degrees are, of course, you want to go be a doctor, you want to go be a lawyer, you want to, pursue that engineering degree with the PE and or architecture, any of those type of roles. Sure, your degree matters, and that very specialized education absolutely matters. But for most of the roles in the construction industry, and really outside the construction industry now, with the likes of the internet, AI, and all the different certifications that one can get out there that are specialized, the university degree is becoming slightly useless and bogus when all we had was books and encyclopedias and those little card catalogs. It made sense, but now it's a completely different world that we live in. And to your point, nobody ever really asks for them. For me, even, I'm just completely merit based. People do business with me based off of knowing me and everything that I did as the owner operator of a design build company in New York City. Now I'm selling tile and stone. I mean, besides all this beautiful tile and stone behind me, which I'm standing in front of, some of our pool and outdoor line, to be really honest with you, I don't know as much as my peers about tile and stone or setting materials or any of that stuff. Now, the installation process, waterproofing, all the technicalities, framing, layouts, all the things that general contractors care about in the tile and stone world, I know. And, my clients appreciate it. But at the end of the day, my clients are only buying from me because of who I am, who I was referred from, or just based off of past experience that I have or past projects that they know that I've worked on. We work with a ton of folks up in the Northeast and the Southeast that have done business with me in a previous role, in a previous life, and they are only buying tile and stone from me because they know, and they trust me. And that's it.
Listen, this would put off a lot of people, but a very popular narrative, like you need an engineering degree to go be an engineer. You do. It's totally the career path. But the question is that I have to everybody is why? Because most people that say that don't have those degrees. So I went to school for engineering, right? And I know that half of your classes are general education and electives. Totally irrelevant, right? I also know that your major focus courses are things like Calculus 4 and differential equations and things that you're never going to do as an engineer, whether it's an electrical engineer, structural engineer, mechanical engineer in the construction industry. You have to go out of your way to get actual relevant course material. Give you an example. I only ever touched a ductilator, which is what you use to size ductwork, like the old school way, until I got an internship where they made me do that. Right? So what am I trying to say? Yes, there should be a need for engineering education at the college level. Is it currently structured to be a focused education? No, it is not. The majority of the education is absolutely irrelevant. And that's why when people go to trade schools, or specifically the union schools, the guys that come out of the pipe fitting or the HVAC or sheet metal unions, they run circles around the college graduates with engineering degrees because they know what the difference between latent and sensible heat is, because it's the only thing that they learned about. They had no noise outside of it. And the other education that they had was in the field working with their hands. So they have the book smarts and they have the knowledge, the tangible knowledge with their hands. So I don't, again, even for engineers, people do not care where you went to school. It's all about what was the last project that you designed and what types of projects have you worked on in the past before you can work on mine.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and we could beat this topic,
Yeah, all day.
all day, but many people, to just kind of stay with that, because the main reason that folks go to university is because it's a promise for a six-figure income or a better lifestyle, upper middle class, maybe even further than that. And that is the promise that universities give. But most people don't even realize that working in the construction industry can lead to six-figure incomes. And relatively quickly, you and I both work roles that are six-figure incomes plus. And, there are many roles that you've already thrown out there, from HVAC to pipe fitter, electrician, that also make six figures plus pretty quickly, especially coming immediately out of trade school or apprenticeship, especially with overtime and everything else. And you spend a lot of time on the internet talking about construction salaries and educating people on construction salaries. What are some roles? And you and I both know this, but maybe to the folks that are listening, both here, maybe a replay on YouTube, or, catching a clip. What are some of the roles, that non-traditional roles in the construction industry, that folks can, perhaps research or look into, that are six-figure plus income roles?
So I think one of the things that we don't do well enough, and I don't mean to bash on Mike Rowe. Mike Rowe is the GOAT for awareness of the opportunities in our industry, right? But he's got a little bit of patronizing language, I would say, and he kind of pats people on the head and he says, like, oh, working in a trade is noble, right? You can make good money and it's a noble thing. And when people hear that, it's like, okay, I'm taking a bullet for society because, and I'm going to like sacrifice my back and my health because it's noble. Like, okay, well, pause. First of all, you have to be aware of what the average person makes to even understand how many dollars you have, right? Relative to everybody else. The average American salary, regardless of age, regardless of experience, regardless of industry, is about $60,000, right? And I always share prevailing wages because that's public information and it's not debatable. What people will debate me on is, well, oh, those are union salaries and not all jobs are union. I understand that 88% of construction jobs are not union. However, those prevailing wages are a good pulse, even if you're non-union, on what's going to be in your paycheck, because
Of course.
it's the market. Like that's what that skill is worth. And you can argue about, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is fair to say that if you are good at your job and you're a pipe fitter or you're a tile setter or you're a concrete guy and you have 10 years experience in the union, 10 years experience out of the union, but you have the same skill set, you're probably going to make the same amount of money. The difference is in the benefits, the supplemental benefits, what gets added onto the paycheck. The larger non-union companies are getting much more competitive in that, where they have a traditional 401k, they have health benefits, and they can even, and usually do, offer profit sharing, right? So they're catching up on that aspect, right? So what I would say is, when you look at those trades, it's not all just electricians and plumbers and carpenters, because those are the things that everybody knows. I could name, and I have multiple posts on my feed, but There's people that have to, like I said, set tile, roofing, paving, any kind of site civil, steel, not just steel like high rises out of the ground, but think about every kind of railing that you ever touch with your hands. On any given project, you might have 50, 80 trades, all of which are, if you're good at your job and you have 10 years experience, you should be able to make $100,000. Even if you're a
Mhm.
general laborer, somebody who cleans, maintains the job site, and you're the maestro of logistics and making, trash management and material management and stuff like that. I know plenty of laborers, even in Florida, right? Right
I
to
do
work
too.
state, right to work
Yeah.
state, right? And everyone
Yeah.
says that that's like slave driving and you can't make money, that make over $100,000, right? So again,
Yep.
that's almost double. That's grenade mathematics, but that's almost double what the average American makes. Okay, so that's the
Mhm.
first thing that we get wrong. We don't make it relative to everybody else. I think if you poll the average young person, they think that like everybody makes $100,000. Less than 20% of the country makes $100,000 or more. Now you can argue, and then is that enough money to live on? Like, what kind of lifestyle are you going to get? How far does that dollar go? That's a different argument. That's an economic problem, that our dollar doesn't go as far as it did 5 or 10 years ago. So how many dollars you have relative to
It's
other
a
people?
different podcast.
Yeah, that's a different podcast, right? That's not what we're here to talk about. But it's two things. It's how much money am I making relative to other people, and how far is that money going to go? Those are two different things. So the first one, we can say for sure that construction, any trade, you have an opportunity to make a lot more than other people. But the second thing that we don't get to is that there is career growth, right? So whether you're in a trade or an engineering company or a carpentry company or a general contractor, you get paid more as a foreman, the quarterback running your crew. You get paid more as a super. You can be an assistant super, and then a site super, or even a road super. What does that mean? Think of a blue collar role, boots and jeans, but somebody that's got a clipboard or an iPad today in their hands, and they're running the job site, right? Those people can make 80,000 all the way up to 120, 130,000. You get to a senior super, you're making 130 to maybe even 250, depending on
Mhm.
the high profile jobs and the experience that you have. You could be a general super and run a whole crew of supers, right? You could be assistant project manager, and you can come up there maybe starting at 60 to 80,000, get all the way up through project manager to 130, 140,000, become a senior project manager, make over 200,000, again, probably up to like the 250, 260 number as a senior project manager. Then you have account executives, you got sales, you got directors, and C-level people. And then you all always have, the limitless growth of an entrepreneur, right? So
Mhm.
there are plenty of roles. Construction isn't this like indentured servitude, the sentence to indentured servitude that everyone would make it sound like. And when you tell people that it's noble, that they kind
Mhm.
of feel like you're trying to push them into, there is plenty of career growth that we don't talk about, and roles that people just don't even understand are there. That again, we were talking about 100,000 versus 60. You start talking about 200, 250, 300. Now you're making 4, 5, 6 times, what the average American makes. And that's a good place to be.
Yeah, some of
So
these crane operators, like you see in Boston, New York, Florida, any major city, you see these big cranes that are moving material and, just sometimes even a porta potty to the roof. Uh, you know, but they're moving things, right? Those guys are making sometimes 300, half a million plus a year. And that's a very, very risky job. Obviously, they have ridiculous insurance requirements and a lot of license and certification requirements, but these guys are making way more than most of the doctors that I know. And they're risking their life and a lot of lives. And that's why it's one of those jobs that just, requires a
yeah.
lot of people.
Well, and
And they sit in this tiny little box,
yeah.
you know.
It's air conditioned usually, though. Like if they got good equipment, it's air conditioned, so that's good. But
Yeah.
the funny thing about that is there is risk, right? Like I'm not trying to gaslight everybody to say that there's no risk in a trade or in construction, but the notion that it's like 1920 or even 1970 or 1990 is, it's not that, right? I mean, people
Mhm.
were still using asbestos in the 90s, right? In popcorn ceilings, okay? So, and what does that mean? That means that people weren't even really probably taking it seriously until the 2000s. And it's been on a lot of job sites that's now been remediated in a lot of buildings, right?
Of
But
course.
people that you see now in their 50s and 60s and 70s today, they're a result of being around that. Whereas young
Mhm.
people today, they're aware of it. First of all, it's not around in most cases. They're aware of it and they're aware of how to protect themselves from it. Silica wasn't even regulated against until the last 15 to 10 years, which is the dust, what concrete dust basically does to you, right? So we are much smarter than we even were. There are people alive that aren't even 50 years old that have been exposed to things in the construction industry that newcomers will not be exposed to, and
Of
that can be
course.
managed better, right? So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that the risk is going down, way down.
Mhm.
And oftentimes when people get seriously injured in construction, the story ends with, what an idiot. Like, why did that person do that? You know what I mean? Quite often people just aren't thinking, and we got to do a better job at educating and stuff like that. But most times when somebody gets seriously hurt in a job site, just calling it like it is, it's serious negligence or stupidity. Not every time, but a lot of it.
Not every
But
time.
but the notion that like you're sacrificing your health to get in construction just isn't true. I mean, you've seen some people I've had on my podcast talking about jacked people, like people that really take care of themselves, that look great, and they're going to be, healthy. And they'll be the first ones to tell you, yeah, that they take care of themselves better than most people do. And that's why they look good, and that's why they feel good. But it's possible.
Yeah, and to kind of touch on that, because I touch on it on almost every podcast, I believe that a lot of the executives and leaders in this industry, myself included, are very much into our health and fitness. And so if you do follow the Construction Mentor online, that is something that he preaches about just as much as the construction careers, the salaries, and everything else, getting in those workouts, getting some sun, going out for walks. What kind of drove you to that? Were you always like this, or is it just a light bulb that kind of flipped and switched? And what would you recommend to folks? It's the beginning of the year. Most people, it's the 16th. They're about to quit on their New Year's resolution
Right.
in about a week. And so they'll be like, next year.
Well, listen, I think that part of my job that I've taken and this responsibility to promote the industry, I have to acknowledge stigmas that are out there. And we have very bad stigma for mental health and physical health in the industry. I just address physical health. I disagree with a lot of people on the internet. I disagree with the industry. I go to my company. I work for a $15 billion a year company. We got 4,500 employees. I go to the leadership meetings, and I argue with people that the industry, it's not that we're overloading people and that we're overstressing people and that we're necessarily burning them out. That's a band-aid on the surface level issue. We have to look at it like, how strong are people's foundations? I personally have dealt with depression and anxiety and managing those types of things, throughout my life. And especially as I recently, a couple of years ago, became a dad. So I know what it's like to have those things on top of my chest, but then I know what it's like to also build a foundation to be able to handle that stuff better and be able to take on more stress and put more on my shoulders, but feel better about it. Right. So we have to look at, like, what are our habits? People in the construction industry, like, they drink way more than the average person. They do drugs way more than the average person. And that's obviously not good. They don't sleep like the average person does. The average person doesn't sleep well at all. Right. They don't read. They don't do a lot of things that sets up a solid foundation for them to be able to handle things. So, when you look at somebody and they're 60, 70 years old and they're in poor health in the construction industry, there's a 78% chance that they're overweight. There's a 25% chance that they're obese. Okay. Just that one thing alone, you're probably going to be depressed. You're probably not going to feel good about yourself. You're going to be struggling day to day. You're not going to sleep well. You may even have sleep apnea, right? And your blood pressure is probably going to be through the roof. So when you're that person and you're then probably a miserable person on site because you can't handle your job and you struggle to get through the day, how's that going to affect everybody around you? And when you have a whole society of people like that, you're going to have a pretty negative atmosphere, right? So I think it's very, very, very important. Like, we as builders, we know better. Like, you can have the strongest studs in a house, you can have the strongest steel in the world and concrete in the world to build a building out of the ground. But if you don't have a solid foundation, that building is going to crumble. We have had zero focus on the foundation of people in the construction industry. we put all these band-aids up and we give them all these hotlines and things to and try to take the weight off of them to make that all those members that I just talked about stronger, but we have not focused on the underlying issues in the construction industry, and we need to. And it's not even just in construction. I would argue that this is a problem for men in general. Like they're not taking care of themselves and they don't have good habits. So why would
Yeah.
you expect to be able to handle any kind of stress or not have depression and not have anxiety in your life? It's very important for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. The phrase "go touch some grass," I mean, it really does mean something.
Mhm.
I have moved to South Florida and spend a lot more time outside and enjoy a lot more outdoor workouts and outdoor time. I've always gone for a walk after work at the end of the day to kind of clear my head and reset and turn off really from the workday. And now I do those walks on the beach or by the beach, listening to the ocean completely barefoot. It's a very different situation than walking around, paved roads in Westchester County. As beautiful as the paved roads are in Westchester County, New York, it is not the same as walking around barefoot in my backyard, or even having a backyard to begin with, right? And the ocean, the sand, and everything else. And for my mental health, for those who knew me and have known me for a very long time, they know that my energy has really shifted now that I have the freedom to do those things. And obviously, not everybody lives by the beach and not everybody has a backyard or a park nearby to go do these things. And I didn't for many, many years. So, yeah, just walking around your neighborhood and putting the phone away, leaving it at home, and just listening to the birds chirp or whatever, comes to mind. You and I are both very spiritual people, and, we're open about that as well. So sometimes you need to shut the noise off so you can hear from God. There's so much noise around us that sometimes we want answers and the answers are there, and we're just too busy or too distracted to even see those answers are completely right in front of us. So definitely didn't want to leave this conversation without talking a little bit about mental health, spiritual health, emotional, physical, and how it all ties together. And you wrapped it up with a bow very nicely, saying that, if you're poor health or you're not feeling well, you're just going to be that grumpy old man or that grumpy guy or gal on the job site, or that person that's just not going to be agreeable to be around. And construction's a team sport. I don't care if you like basketball, you like football, you like baseball. I mean, they do not work unless the team works together. And these buildings, these projects, they do not get built or demoed unless the teams work together. And we all have to work together. We have to see each other every day. And to your point, it's not just our industry, it's so many other industries. So, if there's any takeaway from this little snippet, it's that, we encourage folks not just to wait till January or do things for 90 days or 30 days, although those are great to get started, but then keep that momentum, build it into a habit. Little children have routines, and doctors constantly, harp on kids having routines, going to bed at the same time, going to sleep at the same time, eating around the same time, nap times around the same time. There's a reason for that. As adults, we just kind of need to go back to that and make the time for those things, because it is important and it's preventative, right? We're either going to pay for it now or we're going to pay for it later in the hotlines and the hospital visits, or God forbid, somebody's life.
Amen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I have two more questions for you, and then we can kind of close out. We've talked about so many amazing things already. But the constructionmentor.org, which is your organization, you have a course, and we talked a little bit about it during my podcast, is something that you created as a give back. Obviously, you're not hurting for money. You have a great job. You work for a huge company. You probably don't even have the time, honestly, but you want to pay it forward. When someone comes to you unsure of their direction, What's the first thing you help them get clarity on? Is it skills? Is it mindset? Or is it opportunity?
Yeah, so when you go to constructionmentor.org, you can schedule time with me, and it's, $99 for the hour. And like you said, I don't need the money. My company charges my clients way more than that, like by
Yeah, of course.
3 or 4 multiples, right? And I could very easily go make more money than that if I wanted to charge for basically just doing what I do as a consultant, right? So,
Mhm.
uh, if you're not willing to do that for yourself and invest that money, then you're probably not even worth talking to, right? Because you're not taking yourself seriously. Like if you just expect people to stop what they're doing and give you valuable information for free, like you got another thing coming. So I do it.
And wait, before you, and if you got it for free, you're probably not paying attention because you got it for free.
Right.
Because you got a lot of information for free, even in this podcast and so many other podcasts that are out there that I could rattle off that are construction related,
Mhm.
from your podcast and others. But most people, they listen, it goes in one ear and out the other, as my mother said. So
Correct.
anyway, keep going.
Correct. And I love doing it. Listen, like I said, like here it is, right? I got the cross on my neck. You have it on yours.
I noticed
I
that too.
I feel as though that this is my God-given purpose. And that's exactly what I try to talk to people about.
Same.
Not God, but all right, why do you want this in the first place? Like, what are you trying to work towards? What is it? A lifestyle? Is it just a job? Like you don't know what to do? You know, what purpose are you trying to serve? I think that a lot of
So
people,
purpose.
you got to find your purpose, right? Like a
Mhm.
lot of people think that I always use the plumber example, right? Like people always say, like, love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. Like, okay, that's terrible advice. But maybe being a plumber enables you to make enough money to do philanthropy, right? Maybe you can start your own
Mhm.
company and then employ people and put food on the table for people.
Mhm.
What is, maybe you have a passion that you want to serve, maybe you want to travel, maybe you want to do, something that you love. Like what purpose are you trying to serve by getting this job and starting this career? Right. And then we lay it out like, okay, you want your lifestyle to look like this. You could do that in this job. Here's where you are now. And here's how you're going to take the steps to get there. We got to start laying that map out. And then the second thing that we usually do is, how do I find those opportunities? Where do we reach out? And how do I get prepared to actually shine in that interview? Right. Especially if you have no experience. And
Mhm.
the reason that I made that course is number one, because I don't know what people are teaching in construction management courses in college. I just posted about that the other day. The kid had no idea what he was talking about when he was, shock interviewed, I think they call it. But it's not what we need to know on day one. So I
Absolutely.
compressed that. It was originally supposed to be 20 hours. Couldn't do it. Had to put in way more than that. So it ended up being 40 hours. But it's all the things that I would pray somebody knew on day one, as an entry level person. But people kept asking me for, they needed something to put on their resume, right? They
Mhm.
wanted something to show, number one, that they were committed, and number two, that they had some sort of knowledge, that an employer could be excited about, and that they wouldn't be just like, because what is an employer trying to do? They're trying to evaluate what kind of lift you're going to be when they hire you and
Mhm.
they invest money into you. So if at least if you know what a submittal is and an RFI is, and you understand invoicing processes and permit processes, and you know a little bit about 14 different trades, you know something, right? They're not starting from square one. So that's I answered a little bit more than you asked for there, but that was it.
Actually, it's a good answer, and we had an answer in the chat, question, I'm sorry. We had a question in the chat, and you kind of answered it a little bit, but I'm just gonna read it. It's from Seth Kalman, and he says he's hoping to hear some perspective on how we as an industry can better serve our clients. We've talked a little bit about that on the podcast. He says faster, better, cheaper, and more predictable projects. So a lot to unpack there, and maybe you can give us a quick 1 minute, 2 minute
Yeah,
answer on that. And Seth can most definitely dive into your DMs, my DMs,
sure.
and get a little bit more in depth about it. But yeah, why don't you let us know
Yeah,
your
listen,
thoughts on this?
everybody always wants it faster and cheaper and higher quality, right? That's always going to be the driver, and usually you got to give
He
up one out
didn't
of the
he
three.
didn't say higher quality, so at least he's been in the construction industry long enough to know that he can't have all 3. He said
Right.
faster, better, and cheaper. I guess better is the quality piece
Yeah.
of it, but you gotta pick 2, y'all.
Yeah. So you usually have to give up one, right?
Yeah.
But the thing that I tell people to focus on, and you don't need experience to do this, is trying to make your client feel like their needs are the most important thing in the world to you and educating them.
Mm,
Now, what does that mean? That means that you have to ask questions. You have to understand what makes them tick. What's going to be important to them. Is it a clean job site? Is it a certain end user being satisfied or happy, with their space? Do you have to bring that person in to make sure that their needs are going to be covered? Because maybe the architect did, maybe they didn't, whatever. But you have to do that not only for your client, but everybody else around you too, right? Like you got to treat everybody, your own team as your clients, your subcontractors as your clients. And if you're just genuinely out there to serve everybody and to make sure that everybody's needs are met and make their life easier, then you're going to succeed. And the best thing that you can do is ask questions. But the second best thing that you can do is educate your client, because the question was about the
hmm
client. Where clients get most frustrated is they feel like they're like contractors are out there to get them or to, kind of screw them. But if you understand what their needs and why they need things when they need them and what's important to them, you can say, hey, I can meet this schedule because I can do it this way, or I can't do it because of X, Y, and Z. And if you try to walk them through, what you're dealing with, then they can usually become more agreeable, or they can concede something else to get what they want, over here. So that's probably the way that I see most people failing, is they don't take enough time to understand their clients' needs or to educate them. And you got to be careful when you educate them. That doesn't mean you call them and let them know that every time there's a problem and like, something's on fire, the sky is falling. You always want to have fire extinguisher. Like if you're going to say, hey, this is an issue, but here's a potential solution. Here's my fire extinguisher to put this fire out.
Right.
Right? You
You got to
always want
have
to try
one
to
or
be
two
solution based.
solutions.
Right.
Yeah, and this applies to the supply side of the construction industry as well. I deal with fires all day, all the time, and no construction project is perfect. A lot of people like to point fingers, and the suppliers and the subcontractors are usually the first to blame. I didn't get my stuff in time, so I had to push the timeline or whatever. I didn't know that this was going to take 2 weeks to come in, right? So, one of the reasons that I think the company that I work for stands out is quality. And of course, we're wholesale, we're selling direct, you're not buying retail. So the price, but there's time then that you have to give us. You cannot walk into a store and walk out with 2 crates of tile. You've got to give me the 5 to 7 days to ship it from my distribution center. Or if the stone is coming from overseas, it might be 12, 14, 16 weeks lead time. Bringing in your suppliers, your subcontractors in at the beginning, and this is my answer to that question, as early as possible in the process, not when you need a product that's special order 3 weeks from now and it takes 6 weeks to get in, and then it's my fault. But you didn't ask me for the product in time. So I think people, don't know what they don't know. And so, bringing all the parties in, the relevant parties in early on in the stage, or just shooting me over a set of plans, right? That I can
Mhm.
read and say, okay, we need tile, stone, and setting materials for these rooms. And this is approximately what's needed. Are we thinking core product, special order product? What is the budget for the project? And working with the pre-con manager or the estimators on that, or even the designers, because we work with a ton of designers and, want to provide a good quality product. All of our products are quality. And that's, I think, the main reason that folks come to us. We're also privately held, so I can do a lot with
Mhm.
numbers. And, you're not buying overstock at a big box store, which, we sell at those big box stores, but it's usually product that maybe didn't meet a quality assurance standard for us
Mhm.
to sell direct to a developer or a builder. Or perhaps it's stock that we have very little of and the lot numbers don't match. So we have to get rid of it. And those are great for small little projects like, home renovations, bathrooms, etc. But when I see some of these larger builders telling me, oh, I can go to XYZ big box store or XYZ, other place, I'm like, sure, but is your white subway tile all going to be the same shade of white? And the answer is probably not. So, That is a faster and cheaper solution, but the quality is, always not going to be great. So, with that, I think, I want folks to be able to find you on other platforms. Like I said, we keep these to about an hour. We're almost at an hour. That was the only question that we had in the chat for today. Although Jesus, my buddy Jesse, also said, let's get TikTok famous. So, I'm going to leave that to you and Mike because you're both, catering a little bit to more of the younger generation. But where can folks find you? I know you're the construction mentor on all platforms, but what are these platforms?
So the construction mentor _ in between the construction and mentor, and that's on Instagram and TikTok. And then if you go construction mentor podcast on YouTube, and if you just type in the construction mentor podcast on Spotify, you can find it. But those are the main platforms that I'm on now. And I try to get to everybody's DMs. I'm getting better about it. I just got a virtual assistant, so she's helping me, comb through those and freeing up some of my time to get to everybody. But don't hesitate to reach out. I try to get to them within a week. Sometimes it's the same day, but everybody's, welcome to reach out to me anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Folks, I am the Gloria Marie on all platforms. So you can find me at the Gloria Marie. Pretty simple on Instagram, of course, here on LinkedIn, and anywhere else where you like to listen to your podcasts. This will be reposted as a replay on YouTube next week. We post all of our podcasts and live streams on YouTube, and maybe we'll start doing Spotify because you brought up a really good point today that some folks just want to stay on their Spotify. So maybe we'll look into that as well. But thank you everybody for joining us today. I am live again from the Emser Tile and Stone showroom. You guys have an awesome time. Bye. I think we're still on, but hopefully, hopefully we'll get off soon. I am not great with tech, so this is the after show. I guess.
Oh, we could probably just leave the room.